and welcome back to my series where I question standard operating procedures in audio mixing. This is not about tips or tricks you're finding on every other YouTube channel. These are the things I've learned from actually doing the job working as a mixing engineer. In this video, I will share 3 things that I've discovered about mixing drums that made a real difference for me lately. So these are the drums we are going to work with today. The first 2 things I want to talk about today are both ideas that came from ignoring track labels. Just because a track is called kick-in or snare bottom, it does not mean it has to serve that purpose in the final mix. I started thinking less about what a mic was meant to capture and more about what it could offer in a different context. That mindset opened up a lot. So let's go to our first example. The snare bottom mic. Normally, you would think about it as just high-end texture for the snare drum sound. But in a lot of sessions, that microphone actually ends up recording a surprising amount of kick drum bleed. And not the typical high-end clicky type that you would get from a kick-in microphone. It's often this mid-range that sits right there where I want the punch of the kick drum to be. So if I need more aggressive mids in the kick, I'll just duplicate the snare bottom track, route it to the kick group and throw a gate on it, sidechained from the kick out mic. And it only opens when the kick is playing and I get that gritty, present layer that doesn't sound artificial or scooped. So let's solo the kick drum and let's actually solo only the kick out mic. This is the kick out mic. So I also have a kick in mic, which is this one. Let me turn it up. This is an AKG D12 or D20 actually. This is a mic that's beloved by a lot of people, but I don't really like it in this case. I still need to get more of the high-end and attacky sound of the kick drum. So that's why I duplicated this snare bottom track, it's this one, and I routed the duplicate to the kick drum bus. And now I inserted a gate that is sidechained to the kick out mic, so it only opens when the kick out is playing. So now let me show you all of the kick drum mics without the snare bottom. And now let's unmute the snare bottom mic. And now I'm going to play the track one more time and I'm gonna unmute and mute the snare bottom mic while it's playing. That's a huge difference. Let's hear it with all of the drums on, and I'll start with the snare bottom mic off. The next thing uses a similar idea, but this time we are gonna work on the snare sound. Just like with the snare bottom track, I started asking, do I really need to rely on only the snare top and bottom tracks to define my snare sound? Because nobody listens to a snare drum with their ear right against the top or the bottom head. So sometimes I'll duplicate the stereo room mics, I'll route the copy into the snare bus, put a gate on it and sidechain it to the snare top track. So this room layer only opens when the snare top hits. What it gives me is this wide and natural sounding snare image, built from mics placed in a space where a real listener's ears would actually be. And because it's gated, it doesn't wash out the groove. It just adds this dimensional bloom around the snare that you can't really fake with samples or reverbs. Here's the snare drum with only the snare top and bottom microphones. Sounds good, but now let's hear how it sounds when I'm adding the room microphone. And once again, I'm gonna mute and unmute while it's playing. And let's hear it again with the whole drum set active. last thing I want to show you today is something I've been experimenting with a lot recently. Saturating drums before compressing them. I used to approach saturation like most people. A bit of harmonic color after things were already balanced and controlled. But lately I've started doing the opposite. Hitting individual mics, basses, even the full drum bass with saturation first and then compressing it. And the difference is kind of wild. When I saturate first, the distortion sounds raw, sometimes even a little trashy on its own. But once it goes through a compressor, it tightens up in a way that feels musical and textured, not messy. The transients lose that spiky clinical edge. They get a bit rounder, not dull, but wider. It's like the compression is reacting more smoothly because the saturation has already filled in the sharpest peaks. And compared to compressing clean signals, it just gives the drums more character. Again, it's not subtle, but it's also not about destruction. It's about shaping how the compressor hears your drums before it even touches them. So now I'm going to show you how this works on my snare group. Here is the snare group soloed. As you can see, I'm going into the Kramer tape plugin and then into my 1176. Let's listen to it without the Kramer tape. Now let's toggle the Kramer tape on and off. As you can hear, there's a difference in volume, but as you can also see, the compressor is compressing a lot less when I've got the Kramer engaged. Let's look at that one again. So now let's hear it on the whole drum set. As you can see, I'm using a different tape saturation as well as a different compressor this time, because some tape saturations won't work as good in some cases as they do in other cases. And for this drum bass, this UAD oxide tape actually worked a lot better than the Kramer one. So let's listen to the whole drum kit without the saturation. Sounds good. Now let's add the saturation. I'm going to play the whole clip again and I'm going to toggle on and off the saturation. So that's it for today. Remember, these aren't tricks, these aren't hacks. I'm not saying you should mix this way. Just that sometimes stepping outside the usual logic reveals better options. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, please consider subscribing to my channel and check out the other videos in my Past the Defaults playlist. Thanks for watching. Bye.